Welcome to the Bourbon Bar. This is LJ Marciano with Will Coonrod and our producer Paul Kessler. The Bourbon Bar is all about generating thought, starting dialogues, and perhaps even learning something along the way. You are free to disagree, and that is perfectly okay. Please don't walk away offended. We are learning just like you. And of course, as with all media, nobody is forcing you to listen. Turn off the things you don't like, but be prepared to only understand one side of things. Opening song today was Janie's Got a Gun by Aerosmith. Steven Tyler explained it's about a girl who shoots her father because he's sexually abusing her. And we're going to talk about gun control, obviously, today. But before we jump in, I just wanted to share with everyone today, Paul Kessler and I are drinking Single Barrel Master Distiller Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey by Kirkland. So that's one of the three Kirkland brand. Kirkland is the Costco brand, for those of you not familiar with bourbons. I was able to snag all three throughout the past year and a half or so. They were actually ranked pretty well, and so I thought I'd share what we are drinking here today on the Bourbon Bar. So Buffalo, New York, last Saturday, a crazy racist with a deranged sense of being walked into a Tops grocery store in Buffalo, New York, and killed 10 black shoppers and injured another black person and 2 white people. I wouldn't mention their race, except race was the motive for the heinous crime. I won't be mentioning the shooter's name, as I believe that encourages notoriety, so I'll refer to him as the deranged racist. Now, in this country, you are innocent and proven guilty. This one appears pretty cut and dry to me. I don't know if you guys have watched any of this, but I'm going to take a little bit of a judicial leap here and say this guy did it. One of the reasons why I'm going to say he did it is he live streamed the crime on Twitch using a helmet camera, and Twitch allowed it to run almost for 2 minutes. They figured it out and they cut him off just under 2 minutes. The victims ranged in age from 20 to 86. Most were over 50. This particular, we'll call him the deranged racist. The deranged racist, while in high school, apparently was taken to the hospital for a psych consult after he said he aspired to a murder-suicide. And I'm right in my notes. I wrote, "Hello, red flag." The AR-15 style rifle he used was purchased legally, but New York doesn't allow sales of the ammunition magazines that were used. He passed a background check. Listen to this. He passed a background check on the day he bought the weapon. Go back to what I just said a few minutes ago. Hello, red flag. I don't want to ignore that this was an attack that was racially motivated, and we can spend hours talking about this motivation and the deranged racist belief in some conspiracy centered around a plot to reduce white people's global influence by replacing them. And we'll cover that at some point on the podcast. But I really want to focus on the gun control piece of this. By the way, as an aside, the deranged racist has pleaded not guilty, if you can imagine that. So I'd like to talk about gun control today and whether changes need to be made here in the United States. It's a pretty hot topic. It's has been the hot topic for a long, long time. There's a lot of dialogue around it. Just go on Google and Google, top shootings in the country. You get a huge laundry list. So I'm just going to tick through some of them just to remind everybody. And we're talking about mass shootings here. We don't have to talk about just mass shootings though today. We could talk about just shootings. Harming 25 people, going in and shooting 5 people, going in and shooting 1 person. I'd like to talk about it all today. So I think a lot of these shootings, believe it or not, has happened since 2000. Las Vegas Strip Massacre in Las Vegas, Nevada, 58 fatalities. The Orlando Nightclub Massacre in Orlando, Florida in 2016, 49. I'm going to skip around here. Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook is one we talk about a lot because it was an elementary school. Sandy Hook Elementary Massacre, 27 people. El Paso Walmart mass shootings, El Paso, Texas, 20. United States Postal Service. Here's an old one. I think this is where we jokingly say when someone goes postal. The United States Postal Service shooting was in Edmond, Oklahoma in 1986. It was 15 people. Binghamton shooting, Binghamton, New York, 2009, 14 people. And then there's the Fort Hood massacre. We hear a lot about the Fort Hood massacre in Fort Hood, Texas, 13 people. So what's the debate? So let's talk about the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. There's always the Second Amendment. And, I like to talk about the Constitution. It governs who we are. But I'd like to talk about, what is the gun rule in the Constitution? So the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So this is the I get to have a gun part of the amendment, Second Amendment. Do you believe that amendment, the Second Amendment, is the constitutional guarantee that you are allowed to possess the type of weapons that the United States manufactures today and keep them in your home, giving you the ability to go in and wipe out a mass amount of people? And that's the dialogue I like to have. And I know there's going to be, I looked up, do people go hunting with these guns? On the other side of the line today, we have a hunter. Will hunts. I've seen his camo and his ammo. So I know he hunts. And, I was teasing him before we started the show. Does he hunt with an AR? We could get into, is it hunting with an AR sport or not? I don't know. I'm not a hunter. I grew up in a hunting household. My father had a double barrel shotgun right above the fireplace. So don't forget, I grew up in the 70s. In the 70s, it was all about home and hearth, little house on the prairie. So my father's shotgun was displayed just above the mantle as just like a painting. And there it was. It had a barrel lock on it, though. And that is what he went hunting with. Now, my father never caught a deer ever when I was young.
What would he hunt there in New York?
So deer. There was a rabbit season, I think, and then he would go, and I think would he use bird shots or something when you hunt rabbit? Because like a big bullet would blow a rabbit apart, and then
I believe so. Yeah, that
and
sounds
then he would
right.
go, and then he would go hunting for deer. But I actually think he didn't go hunting. I think he used to just throw the shit in his car, and he probably used to go out and have an affair. But that's just my take.
Use it as a cover. Yeah,
he was hunting, but maybe it wasn't for deer.
Yeah, no, possibly.
So let me ask, do you need these guns? They're the ones that commit these crimes, allow these people to commit the crimes. The guns don't commit the crimes. The people commit the crimes. These guns allow the people to commit the crimes. Do you need these guns to commit these crimes? Or do you think if we take these guns away that the crimes stop, or do the crimes look different?
The crimes would definitely look different, right? Because if this isn't the tool one can use for that, they're going to have to find other means. Typically, other means would be more challenging, I guess, in my mind, to accomplish the same goal on such a grand scale, right? So you said like the Las Vegas shooting had how many fatalities? It was like 50, 60
58
people?
58.
Yep. So just under 60 people. That's a lot of firepower for one individual to be able to unleash on unsuspecting bypassers and individuals in any scenario.
It makes it easy. So I would say
it makes it easy. Exactly.
And the reason why
the
reason why I think of that, Will, is I think about April 19th, 1995, which for those of you who don't remember that date, that is the date of the Oklahoma City bombing. So a young man named Timothy McVeigh was pissed off at the country for something that happened in Waco, Texas. He made a deadly bomb out of fertilizer, diesel fuel, and other chemicals. Do you know how many people died in that Oklahoma City bombing? Pulled a van up to the federal building in Oklahoma City. Do you know how many? He wiped away in one fellow shot, I think 2/3 of the building, and damaged hundreds of buildings surrounding. 168 people died, including 19 children. There was a daycare in that center. By the way, McVeigh was executed by lethal injection on June 11, 2001, so we no longer have to worry about Timothy McVeigh. But I bring that up because when you have the predisposition that you want to go out and harm people, is it the gun, or is it the crazy that's going on in your head? And if it's the gun, makes it easy. This guy just strolled into wherever he went and purchased a gun. They did a background check on this guy who actually had been in for a psych consult for the very thing he ended up doing.
How does that not pull in? I do not understand that, especially from like, you know, a younger individual. And I think that that's something that should be looked at and incorporated more in those background checks. And I mean, let me ask this, because I really don't know. I haven't been in high school in a very long time. I don't really ever remember going to like my guidance counselor or any form or fashion when I was in high school. Is that how well documented would be incidences and things like that, you know, throughout their high school career, let's say, as someone's becoming 16, 17 into an 18 adult, where they are legally then able to go out and purchase a firearm? Does that information carry over into a background check?
I would guess not. I mean, so it was his counselor. I think he said this too, and I think the counselor posed the question on, you know, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And, you know, I want to do a murder-suicide. Hello, that comment and the fact that you had to go to a hospital for a psych consult, that the school therapist thought it was important enough to elevate it, which good for that therapist, that should red flag you for the rest of your life. You don't get to buy a gun. But you know, there's, you know, so this is a great topic, by the way, because there's so much middle ground in this conversation.
Yep.
And right now, this country is so far one side. We have to have our guns. We have to have them, and we have to have all. Yeah. We have to have all of them. We have to have the semi-automatics. We have. It's not a matter of just keeping a pistol in your home.
It's not that we have to have them. They say that we have the right to have them.
We have the right to.
That's very important, right? We have the right.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I mean, did you hear the statement though? I mean, we have the right. Apparently, we're going to start a militia. I mean,
so well, I wanted to dig into this more, LJ. This was, and I was just waiting for like the actual reading of the Second Amendment, right? Because it always just what does it get boiled down to every single time? Right to bear arms, right?
Yep.
They shorten it, but if you actually read it, to your point, a well-regulated militia. So first and foremost, regulated. Right there, like in the very first line, a well-regulated militia, whether that's regulation of an individual or a militia typically being more than one individual, right? And the ability to, as a collective pool or society, pool together. And the other, I mean, I'm amazed at how the conversation doesn't come around the aspect of like, why did the founding fathers put this in as the Second Amendment? What was the context and thought in their mind to go, we need this as a right?
So it was because coming out of Britain, coming out of England, they were not allowed that, and so they could not bear arms to rise up against the rule. So that's what it was.
A tyrannic government.
So when you look at the word militia, what do you think of militia? Because I think about the crazies out there in the woods somewhere. I do.
No,
I think about people who want to overthrow the government.
What was that? I'm sorry.
I think about people who want to overthrow our government, and there's no way the government is going to allow you to do that anyway. So this.
Do you think of that in context of that time and when the Second Amendment was written? Are you saying that, and I assume what you're meaning is militia in today's terms, as like right now in 2022, if you hear the term militia, you think of crazies, individuals?
I think it's the same thing, Will. I think the militias back then were the people who were unhappy with the government. It was what their view of a tyranny was, and I think the people who form militias today, who hide out in the woods in some scary place, it's the same thing. I think they think our government is full of tyranny, and they're trying to overthrow them. So when the opening sentence, the Second Amendment, is a well-regulated militia. Are we really supporting a well-regulated militia even as the opening sentence of the Second Amendment? That's just pure nuts.
No, and that was going to be my point, LJ, was that like to again, having it shortened and abbreviated down to right to bear arms is so misleading to what the actual context of the Second Amendment is. And so you start out, well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Again, to your point of like, we wanted to create this because we experienced what it was like to not be able to defend ourselves against a government that could impose whatever rules they wanted to on us, right? So we have the right to bear arms to be able to defend ourselves against that.
So, the right to bear arms back then was you had to make your bullets out of lead. I mean, your wife sat over the fire with this little device. She poured it in the liquid. She made the little round thing. Somebody had to go in front of you with this, I don't know, mop on a stick, put some gunpowder in there, shove it in, pack the gun. It wasn't standing in a hotel in Las Vegas being able to wipe out 58 people.
58 people. Yep.
It really was the home and hearth thing.
Yes. The context, though, and the reason I wanted to dig into that, LJ, was around, okay, so the Second Amendment, the thought process from our founding fathers, I believe, would be we want to be able to defend ourselves from the government, not from other individuals. Other individuals, when it was one-on-one, what would they do back in the day?
I think they'd
have a duel.
Yeah, right.
They'd have a respectful, like, proper duel, if you will.
Yeah.
Which, again, I'm not citing for that, but I'm just like, this
Paul
amendment
Kessler, I'm pissed at you, and I think we should go out on the street and, at high noon, and with our backs to each other, Jessica can count down. We're gonna walk.
Steps.
Could you imagine what your neighbors would think?
Oh my goodness!
And maybe
gentlemen,
yeah.
like gentlemen, you shoot to the sky because that's what they used to do, right? So if they wanted to draw, they'd shoot to the sky.
Well, isn't there a component where you can choose the weapons in a duel too?
I think so.
So you can.
I take the ray gun, Halo ray gun every time. No, I'm just kidding.
I think you play Western music too while it's going on, like
get some going. But yeah, so and again, the context and reason I bring that up is the Second Amendment in my eyes was the right to defend yourself against the tyrannic government, not from other individuals. That was not the extent or not the initial purpose. I think it was something that, like, as a byproduct of having this was like, well, yes, you have the ability then to defend yourself, but it was really meant to defend against a tyrannic government and people imposing rights and wills that you didn't feel you should have to follow.
So, Will, tell me about guns in your life, because it's good to have a hunter in here. I'm the U.S. government, and I'm going to take away your guns, Will. So I'm going to take. I don't know what kind of guns you have. I was joking about that. I'm going to come in and I'm going to take away your guns. Where do you say no? You can't take this one, LJ. President LJ. You're not allowed to have this one. And so where's the line? Where's the line between I can take your gun, hunting, sport, whatever you do with it, even individual protection? I hear what you're saying about the Second Amendment wasn't written for individual protection, but it's morphed into that individual protection versus government overreach.
Sure. And I think it's important to instill the idea that no system's ever going to be perfect, right? But we want to try to minimize the risk and endangerment to others based on the set of rules that we'd create around this. So like I said, I'm an avid hunter. I've hunted since I was 12 years old. We have, my father and me keep our guns locked up in a safe. They're not there available to access for anyone, even if they were to break into the home. I don't even know the code to the lock. My father is the only one that actually knows that code. So he himself is the only one that's able to get access to my guns, which are kept in his safe.
So is it a fair statement to say you're not trustworthy then?
I guess. According to my father, apparently. No.
I joke. It's a joke.
Yeah, but no, but it brings up the good point of like why not? Like, why do I really need access directly to those guns? And I know people will make the argument that, like, no, I need them for protection in my own home, right? Like, that's like the number one. I need to have protection for myself, protection in my home. Which, again, I do believe that guns themselves aren't the problem, LJ. Like, if you are a responsible gun owner and you want to have an AK or an automatic rifle, you should have the right to do that. I firmly believe that. What I struggle with and what I think we need to do is be more cognizant and more particular on the individuals that we're allowing to have gun ownership. It's not a right. Let me put it this way. It's a right to have a gun, but you also have the right to have that gun taken away if it imposes in any capacity threat towards others. So I think background checks need to be substantially more inclusive of a bigger picture of individuals and how things, especially from a mental health standpoint, aren't like the focal point of a background check. It is dumbfounding me because they look at like past felonies, crimes, and legal things that you would have had to have done to basically, bar you from having the right to purchase a firearm. Not, I went and told my psychologist or therapist that, like you said, I want to have a murder-suicide. Like, that's an aspiration of mine to have, or that I was troubled and dealt with mental instabilities and problems through my teens and into my 20s or whatever it might be.
Can I back you up for a second? Are you saying did you say it's okay to have an AK?
I think, yeah. I do not see a problem with someone's right to bear arms. I'm 100% on board. Even with, and a great example of that, LJ, would be like my cousins live in Iowa, right? Iowa's not much going on. They live kind of in a rural area. They enjoy going out. They do things like coyote hunting, um, just target practice, and they have a plethora of ammunition and guns that they're able to go out and do that with. And I think that they are 100% in their right to be able to do that.
But the gun control lobby, the place they typically start, and they do always encourage background checks, but the place they always start are the semi-automatics. And that's why I don't think we advance anything in this country. That spools up the gun advocates, and then we don't go anywhere, because then they're coming after your guns. They're coming after your guns. And their stance is they're coming after some of the guns because those guns are the ones that can wipe out a lot of people in a short time. But apparently so can fertilizer. So should we get rid of fertilizer? So exactly. I mean, again, as I said, this is a great topic because there's so much middle ground much middle ground that we never get to as a country, because everybody goes to the extreme. They're taking your guns. No, they're not taking your guns. They're taking some types of guns that maybe the forefathers.
That's not going to solve the issue, though.
It's not going to solve the issue. That's a great segue. It is not going to solve the issue.
It's not going to solve the issue.
Right.
Guns don't kill people. People kill people.
Yeah, it's not. LJ, you are absolutely correct. It is not going to solve the issue. There is some unaddressed mental health stuff in this country. So my wife and I, we got our gun permits in the past year. We haven't bought a gun yet. We haven't. We both got them. We went to the thing. It was the most hysterical thing you'll ever see in your life. But so a side story. So we're driving on the way to the indoor range, and we're going to take the class. And we get there. Before we get there, I'm like, wouldn't it be funny if we got there and like we were both really good shots? So it's a 4-hour class. It's your permit to carry here, and it's a 4-hour class. And the instructor's like, we're going to shoot first. I'm like, what? I've never shot a gun. This was last spring. We're going to shoot first because then it's out of the way and you don't have all the anxiety about waiting around how you're going to shoot. So we go in there. My wife goes first. She does fine. I go in there. I shoot once. And then I shoot it again. Well, I didn't see where the second bullet went. And then I thought maybe I shot into the range on the next, shot over the other guy's side of the range. I'm like, oh shit, what just happened? And I looked at the instructor. I'm like, where'd the bullet go? He's like, it went right through the hole of your first bullet. I'm like, whoa.
Sniper, you're a sniper.
Apparently, I missed my calling.
No way.
Yeah.
I got shot over the target.
No. I shot right through I shot in the same exact
hole.
spot.
The same hole, Kessler.
Kessler, don't piss me off.
A statistical impossibility is what this guy's
he's literally from the Matrix.
So there I am. I'm an excellent shot, and so we did this, and we haven't gone bought a gun. And the reason we haven't bought a gun is because we're still not comfortable with it. It's like, we've gone through the whole, okay, it has to be locked up. No access for the children, obviously, because, they think it's cool. We have 2 boys. They're in their late teens. They think it's really, really cool. But so it has made us, we respect gun ownership that much that it's made us so nervous we haven't gone out and bought a gun.
I find that with talking with a lot of gun owners, what I want to know from you is why. Why did you go out and get the permit?
So, that's a good question. Hey, times have gotten a little bit tough in the past 2 years. There's been a lot of fallout from a lot of the police issues, and there's been a little bit of the Wild West going on. And what do you do in the Wild West? You go buy a gun. And so we live a little bit rural, and I was like, it takes the police 30 minutes just to find, our house. So I thought, well, it would be prudent for us to be able to protect ourselves if someone came to our home. And gun laws, and I don't know if everybody knows this, I think gun owners know this, gun laws vary from state to state. It's your state government that mandates your gun laws. And oddly enough, New York State is the toughest state to own a gun in. And this crazy got the gun in New York. That's the ironic part. But so here in Minnesota, you can't use your gun to protect your property, like if you're in your car. You can't go driving around and someone tries to carjack you, which is one of the big crimes that's been going on in the past 2 years. Because unless you feel threatened, your person, then you are basically murdering someone. Now, the exception to that is if someone is trying to get into your home. If someone has breached your home, not your garage, your home, and there's a debate on whether if you're attached garage, blah, 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 but your home. You can't go out shooting in your front yard because someone is walking up your driveway.
It's the castle doctrine.
Yep.
If you're familiar with that term,
I am.
LJ.
I am. So, so Paul, I learned a lot taking the gun class. I learned that I'm a good shot, but I think we did it just because of our times. But as I said, we've done it. We haven't gone out and bought a gun. I took my teenager to the store to look at guns. You'll get a kick out of this. So I took him to the store, and he shoots because he does skeet shooting through school. So I took him to the store to look, and the guy on the other side of the counter, he does the check, make sure there's nothing in it, it's not loaded. He hands me over the gun, and the first thing I do is I put my I had a Lone Ranger gun set when I was 8 years old. The first thing I did is I
put your hand on the trigger.
I put my hand on the trigger, and my whatever at the time 14-year-old yells at me, "You can't do that." He's like,
Smart kid.
Put your finger straight out and point the gun down. Don't point the gun up. I'm like, okay. Apparently, I don't know how to shop for a gun. But so, yeah, that's why we did it. We did it, Paul, because it's the times we're in. And, but, not threatened enough to actually go out and buy a gun, though.
I was going to ask that. So just by taking that class, LJ, do you feel like the need to want to feel safe was in some way satisfied just from going through the process of that without actually having purchased the gun?
A little bit. I mean, some of the class was a little bit, I'll call it gun extreme for my wife and I, because these people who teach these classes, they're very, very nice folks, but they're huge gun advocates. So they come in with guns strapped on already. I mean, it's like, okay, you're teaching a class full of people who
get it.
We get
it.
The one guy who walked in, the one instructor for one of the classes we took, he actually had the gun in his holster, was in the front of his pants, pointing down at his junk. And I'm like, I'm assuming that's loaded because those kind of people don't carry guns unless they are loaded. And I'm thinking that thing goes off, you are going to be in a world of hurt, buddy.
Yeah, that's not for show, LJ.
Yeah,
that's
I get it.
Show.
I get it. I have a good friend who came out to the cottage. He is an officer, and I have a very, very another good friend who's very, very against guns. And so the two of them were there, and the one guy came in and he's like, where can I put my gun? I'm like, I don't know, is it loaded? He's like, well, it's not going to do me much good unless it's loaded. I'm like, okay, fair enough. So we hid the gun. So we thought we hid it. The next day, the other friend's like, hey, did so-and-so get rid of that gun? I'm like, oh, you did see the gun. He's like, yeah, I saw the gun. I'm like, okay.
Huh.
Anyway, yeah. Gun control in America. I think it's a worthwhile pursuit. I think it's worth talking about. The problem is that it always comes after these mass shootings, and emotions are running high, and the first thing out of people's mouths is, let's go after these semi-automatics. That tweaks the other side, and then nothing gets done. And don't forget, the gun lobby in this country is a very, very powerful lobby.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money in gun lobbying.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the NRA is huge.
Yeah. I feel like the conversation again to not trigger the ones that have, because I think it's amazing how disconnected on something that I think a lot of people actually agree overall what the end goal is. And the end goal is we want responsible gun owners with no gun incidents, right? Everyone wants there to be no accidents or mass shootings. Like, no one's advocating for those activities, right? So if we collectively go, okay, well, let's look at creating a structure that limits those risks but still provides the rights to you as individuals, like that would be, a utopia more or less around that. And obviously that's not realistic, but how can we start to shift towards that, as opposed to, like you said, creating a narrative that allows then for the extremists to go, they're coming to take all our guns, from the opposite side, which is like, we want our guns, we can do whatever we want with them, we should be able to do whatever we want, right? And it's like, well, let's look at the holistic picture and go, okay, so we need to do more effective background checks before individuals can purchase guns, and then there should be like ongoing like tests, or like you should have to go in. I think you should have to go in and like see a therapist or talk to somebody and be able to, like, do you know what I mean? Like, I think that that's and would be a very important aspect.
Ooh, are you asking for a lot? That's you know what you're going to get pushed back on that. Well, someone's going to say, well, do I need to go see a therapist to exercise Amendment 1 to the U.S. Constitution?
That's fair.
Yeah.
And no,
it's
you
not.
don't.
It's not a question
But-
for you. I'm not. That's
No,
not
no,
LJ
no, no,
saying.
I'm just thinking here, but, like,
I can see the rebuttal. It's like, what do you mean?
The rebuttal would be, though, I'd come back and I go, the Second Amendment allows us to regulate that militia.
Well,
It's like we have the right to regulate as a government how that right is exercised, right?
Yep,
A Lone
agree.
Ranger does not qualify as a well-regulated individual. And so if we look at it and go, okay, from a regulation standpoint, we're just going to make it, maybe we make it a little bit tougher to go about doing that. But the repercussion would be far less mass shootings and an overall, and I think sometimes the ends that we're shooting for, be it the reduction of mass shootings, individuals and incidences happening around that are related to guns, gets lost in the conversation, like you mentioned, that either you have guns or you don't, or we're going to come and take some guns away. Okay, well, like, let's have a more like transparent and be more vocal on the aspect of less on let's take the guns away and more from how can we look at limiting incidences, accidents, and mass shootings.
Got it. Let's talk about what drives all this. So you said it's not the guns. It's set the guns aside because people are going to find a way to harm people if they're hell bent on harm.
It's just
people.
an easy outlet.
Yep. Let's talk about why. It's not poverty. I mean, it could be poverty, but I mean, we're one of the wealthiest countries in the world. It's in some regards, we're living in a time where besides the recession we're in, obviously, we're living in a time where we would classify as being pretty good. Why? Why is this list, as I look down through this list, why is it all within the past 20 years? A lot of these are in the past 20 years.
From like a mass shooting standpoint?
Yeah. Where do you grow up where someone says to you, hey,
was there,
this is good to do?
I mean, if you go prior to 20 years ago, out of curiosity, and I don't know the answer to this, LJ, but I'd be curious to look at how the documentation, right? Information was not as easily as accessible 20 years ago as it is today. So it's everything. It's not just gun shootings. Everything is shoved in our face every single day. Specifically typically from a news perspective, negative news sells better. Someone wants to hear about how someone went into a movie theater and shot it up that day, as opposed to, maybe there was a marathon runner that, completed a world record time, right? Or someone from an organization went out and donated a bunch of money, time, and resources. That they're not going to report on that.
I tend to think something like this though probably would have made the news. And what I'm thinking of, and I don't have my historical Rolodex in front of me, was somebody shooting from a library tower or something, or a conservatory at a university in Texas, maybe sometime in the 70s. And it was using a rifle kind of thing. I wish I could remember.
I'm not familiar either. Otherwise, I'd help you out.
Yeah. It's a sniper, right? Yeah. University of Texas tower shooting. There it is. University of Texas tower shooting, August 1st, 1966. See, I'm not that stupid. After stabbing his mother and his wife to death the previous night, Charles Whitman, a Marine veteran, took rifles and other weapons to the observation deck atop the main building tower at the University of Texas at Austin. That's what it was. And so that was 1966. He shot and killed 15 people. So I can remember this because that's what I'm saying. It might be. I still go back to the fact that I think it happens more now than it did back then, because this made the news, and it made the news enough, and I wasn't born in 1966, so don't even try that. But it made the news enough that I remember it being talked about in the 70s. And obviously guns have done other damage throughout history. We've lost presidents to guns. We've lost a lot of people to guns. But the mass shooting component of this, like this one, the University of Texas tower shooting, this is now a daily occurrence in this country, weekly maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm looking at the numbers right now from 1982 to 2022. So
I
the
mean,
last 40 years here,
do
and
we
yeah,
have-
you're right. Like the
yeah.
last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
But then
9,
if you
10,
go,
11. The last 11 years, as comparison to the other 30, it's higher substantially in 2016, 17, and 18.
But then when did the drop off begin? Because we kind of started off the show in the same vein of in the old west, right?
Yeah.
In the wild west, it was about basically, I mean, you could shoot somebody dead in the street and run away, and that's just the way life was. So it basically came from this primitive, everyone from themselves, not as civilized society, to maybe what we saw from the 20s through the 80s, and then again we see a rise in crime then.
Media guy over there, do you think it's because back to your point, Will, but a little bit different approach to it, is it because you can become more famous now and you become instantly famous within a day? I mean, this guy was streaming live his killing. I mean,
that definitely plays into it,
do you
right?
think it's why people are doing more of it now, because they get instant notoriety?
I'm sure that that's a component of it, right? Like part of the reason people will do that is to, I want to instill my name and memory on time, like, and in society.
By the way,
yeah, you're right. Like,
I'm reading this University of Texas tower shooting. Gentleman had a tumor found in the white matter of his brain upon autopsy. Tumor found above his amygdala upon his autopsy. So he had
pressing on, sure, his anger or whatever part of the brain.
He had something going on in his head. Yep. I mean, you can
as
argue,
most people do.
You
like
can
you
argue
said, no
most people do.
Person is going to do a mass shooting. Like you or I always think about it like I have no want, desire, or need to do a mass shooting. Do I think I could I always come to the faction of like, if I was put in a place of a kill or be killed situation, would I have it in me to do that? And I think I'd hesitate, not to say that I wouldn't, because I feel like, as a human and as like an animal creature, your back's against the wall. Like worst comes to worst, you're gonna have to.
So that's an interesting. That's an.
I'm sorry.
That's an interesting question, and the reason, because they covered that actually in the gun class. I remember it. They said, the hesitation. A lot of new people in the class, first time gun owner, first time trying to get a gun because of the times that we're in. But one of the questions posed is, can you take a human life? It's one thing to sit there and take the class.
Yeah.
You go to the store, you buy the gun. When push comes to shove, can you take a human life?
I literally,
and I
don't think I could. I
think for a lot of people, you don't know until you know.
Yeah.
Because I think Kessler, I think I'm exactly where you are, where my initial response would be like, no. But you think of that from your standpoint and mental state as of right now. If someone had a gun to your head, was going, I'm going to kill you if you do not kill me, I would have no issue shooting a gun, taking somebody else's life to save my own in that specific scenario. Would I think about it? Would I hesitate? Yeah, I think I would. It wouldn't be a knee-jerk instinctive reaction. And again, I think the conversation gets skewed because, again, these mass shootings aren't happening from individuals that are sane, sound, everyday citizens that are, upstanding, for the most part, upstanding citizens. They're people with mental histories and, problems and depression and other mental things that, basically lead them down the path to where they feel that they have to do this or want to do this. And so the conversation should be more focused on that in that specific narrow vertical within, gun right ownership, not just from a mass perspective of like, okay, we're going to take everyone's guns away.
Mass shootings aside for a second, I think about one of the arguments you often hear is about big cities which typically run liberal, big cities, and they have a lot of gun problems. And they have a lot of legal gun problems. And you'll hear, you want to take gun ownership away from legal gun owners, but you liberal cities New York, Chicago, L.A. You liberal cities, you can't get gun control under. You can't control your guns, and it's a lot of it's illegal guns, and no one ever talks about what you just talked about. It's some of it's a mental health issue. Some of it's the times we're in. It's not necessarily all about guns.
No, I think the conversation, in my opinion, is far from about guns. Personally,
Hey,
I just
yeah. LJ, you ever see anybody get beat up? Or you ever see like a fight in school? Will, have you ever seen a fight in school?
trying to think if I've ever seen someone get their ass kicked.
Yes.
You have?
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say I believe LJ definitely has.
Who got beat up and why?
Well, I'm not going to name names because I struggle with that.
Yeah.
Old high school
Maybe we could just
buddy,
use, like,
colleague.
Believe it or not, it was two women.
Okay.
I can still picture the one. They were having a fight about drugs, and I think the one might have owed. I went to a very, very suburban, almost farm community school, but drugs are everywhere. The one owed the other one money for drugs, and we were in a 3-story building, and I can still remember them falling down the stairs like they had gotten into it so bad.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean,
I think of it today because I've seen posts from one of the women involved in the fight as an adult. So, we're talking now 30 years later. And clearly there's not all the mental faculties that need to be there. They're still not there. So years later, I'm just sitting there thinking, you still don't have your shit together. But, there's more to it. There's mental health stuff. I'm not putting down the person if she has unaddressed mental health needs. But yeah, why do you ask the question?
well, it's very interesting because I think when you think about why you don't see fist fights all the time or every day in life, it's because there's a balance in power, right? It's like, sure, you could mess me up or I could mess you up, but in the end of the day, we're both probably going to get hurt, and there's just too much risk to know that, hey, if I just approach you and just start talking a bunch of shit or disrespecting you or am disrespectful to your partner or key your car, that you could just come and punch me in the face and that'd be deserved, right? So there's that balance in power. There's always that balance in the office, in the bus, on the street. When you walk by somebody, there's that moment where it's like very primitive, where it's like, if I step the line or disrespect this person, if I bump into them even, then they might, physically harm me. And I think going all the way back to the Second Amendment, we talk about balance in power. We see the balance in power between the tyrannical government and the regulated militia, who, by the way, I don't know who's regulating that militia. But when you think about guns in that same way, it's about that balance. So when you look at a liberal city where good citizens don't necessarily carry guns, and a select few of the citizens of the city do carry guns, how's that power balance? If you were to walk down the street knowing that the person you're walking by has the same gun that you have on your hip, would you be so quick to act on them? Would you be so quick to just go out there and, either rob somebody or, boy, this hat's really making me sweat. Or, or like if you really were a little crazy, I mean, would you think that you would go to a public place and just start opening fire?
Well, let me ask you the tag on to that then. Road rage. Do you approach road rage differently than you did 5 years ago today? And by that, someone comes by you, they do something to piss you off. Do you flip them off or beep your horn today?
No.
Why?
Because the consequences are just way greater.
Because you're afraid they have a gun in that other car.
Yep.
You 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I don't know what the timeline was. I might have. Someone comes by and they cut me off or something. I might have flipped them off. I might have, sworn at them, beeped the horn. I don't do that today because now people roll their window down and they shoot at you.
100%. But on the flip side of that, you would flip them off because in your car, there's a safe bubble. There's this facade of safety.
That is true.
Right?
Yep.
So that's the same thing. You could look at it as that same way about gun control. Is it creates a facade of safety that really may not be there.
Got it. Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
In a drawn out way, I guess it does.
Yeah.
but I guess that's my point, is that that's what's interesting to me about gun control. Is you pulled a really nice thread about mental health. Have you seen the movie Minority Report?
No.
I have.
It's with Tom Cruise, right?
Oh, really? Great movie.
Great movie. But basically, they can see crimes happen before they actually happen. And the whole crux of that movie is it right to put somebody in prison for a crime they did not commit, but were going to commit?
Huh.
But you always have the choice.
But you always
Spoilers.
have the
It's a
choice.
90s movie, so I feel like I'm free to talk about this. But yeah, at the end, it's like the idea is that like at any
God,
like,
you guys are
can't see
fucking
the
old.
future. It's always a yeah, we're getting there.
Did you ever see the movie with Michael Douglas called Falling Down? I think it's called Falling Down.
I had not. No.
Okay, so he goes into like
a good one?
he goes into like a McDonald's or whatever in the morning, and it's like 5 past when they stop serving breakfast. I mean, you know how that pisses you off. Like, we stopped serving breakfast 5 minutes ago, So I mean, he's going through divorce, and the dog died. The whole thing. His life, he's falling down. His life is just in a pile of shit. And he goes in there. The person on the other side of the counter denies him breakfast. He comes back with a gun, starts killing people. I mean, it's a falling down.
That's some Pulp Fiction shit.
It is Pulp Fiction shit. I mean, we can sit around and talk about the media's impact on today's gun culture as well. I mean, there's a huge, we can talk about video games.
Yeah, I think studies have shown that the video games don't impose as much of an effect as
doesn't make them numb.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think what it could do is it take individuals that are prone to doing that anyway, hurting themselves or others, and like feeling like it's maybe more okay. I guess I could see that, but I don't think it's going to take someone that would otherwise not harm themselves or others and like make them be like, okay, it's okay to go out and do that. It's like a morality thing. I think from a morality standpoint, it doesn't shift the morals, but it could potentially sway those individuals that are on the fence and thus make a case where, yeah, they do have some sort of an impact. But again, that's not the issue. The issue is how do they get the guns to be able to go out and do that stuff? And then like, okay, are we properly vetting individuals? Again, it's not going to be a perfect system, but how can we make it better around vetting those individuals before they purchase a firearm?
So
to be able to go and do that.
If the Bourbon Bar was responsible, we were alcohol, tobacco, firearm. What we would be recommending is better vetting of gun ownership. So,
yes.
So stop with the going after the AKs right now. Let it be and go for better background checks.
Yep. More thorough, better processing. There needs to be more resources because I know timing's a big thing, right? People want their guns, they want them now.
Yeah.
Well, and to be able to do that, there needs to be resourcing. I'm intrigued that corporations like the NRA, which are multi-million-dollar funded organizations, haven't like on their own behalf started to implement and advocate for those things, like getting ahead of the curve, right? Because they stand firmly on the aspect of like Second Amendment. You're able to have guns. We're going to do everything we can to make sure people keep their guns.
They're afraid to give up an inch.
Exactly.
You give up an inch. You give up an inch. It's the today I'm going to give you checks. Gun ownership checks, and tomorrow you're still going to come for my guns, and so they won't give an inch because they stand here. They're negotiating always from the furthest point.
I would agree with you. I just feel like that's a very childish standpoint. And again, it removes the faction that there's nuance in the discussion and nuance in the steps that can be taken to prevent mass shootings and as a society help us.
So
it removes that step because it should be okay. We're going to take a small step. Okay, now we're going to try to take another step. Nope, stop there on that step. That's stepping too far. But they don't even table the discussion around first steps to try to solve the problem. They're all about gun promotion, lobbying. We need to keep it as open as possible. When in reality, I think they'd be far better off from both standpoints to be like, okay, we're going to do everything we can to get people guns. That being said, we think it's smart that we go ahead and provide resources because that's what we need. We need money to be able to have resources to be able to properly spend the amount of time it takes to vet individuals and then do that in a timely fashion where within 24 hours you can have the gun. 48 hours you're going to be able to have the gun. But they need access to not just criminal records. They need access to psychological records, high school psychological records. Things like that definitely need to play a role and should be more easily accessible. And there needs to be an organization that steps in, I think, and does that. Something else. Sorry, LJ, I know you got something else there. But the other thing that I wanted to touch on around the Second Amendment, and I talked about it earlier, was the aspect that the Second Amendment was so that the government itself could not overthrow and impose rules, regulations on the individuals, right? So they go, we're a seceded nation, we're the United States of America, we don't want to be told what to do. And if the government comes knocking, I want to be able to defend myself. The issue that I have with this thought process nowadays is it basically is irrelevant. From that specific like reasoning to have the Second Amendment, and that being the majority of like the reason we're doing this is to protect us from the government. The government's firearm capability is so beyond whatever the founding fathers thought it probably ever would be that I always use the analogy, you're bringing a gun to a drone fight. At the end of the day, for the Second Amendment to be able to go, nope, I don't want my government telling me what to do, too fucking bad. No amount of AKs is going to stop the government from doing, if they want to wipe you off the face of the earth, they're going to wipe you off the face of the earth. Like it's an insane concept to me that because of the progression, and again, it's the idea that over time things have changed and yet we still abide by the exact wording, and I'll even put that in quotes because it's not the exact wording. We used a paraphrased version of what the Second Amendment is and the reason for having it. And the reason that I'd like to have more discussions around, okay, what is this? What was the purpose? How can we look at implementing? How does that affect us now? And the
think,
argument.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point there. We bring a gun to a drone fight, but that's the thing. Well, that's exactly the thing, is that there needs to be a check and balance. There really does need to be a check and balance.
We're so far beyond that, Kessler. From a societal
you might think that the government is the big show, 6'8", 300 pounds, and just ready to kick some ass, and people with AKs or an armed citizenship would only be like, a fourth grader who's 110 pounds with no muscle. But in the end of the day, they would still have to try to roll over that fourth grader. It's not that the fourth grader is just a piece of paper.
That's not a good analogy. The analogy,
but the resistance is the most important part, though. That's the point. Is that the resistance is the most important part.
But your resistance from analogy of like 140 pounds, that's not 140 pound. You're an infant. That analogy, you're a 6-month infant.
But you're still discounting the fact that
fighting a full-grown man at 300.
Right.
There's zero chance you win. Zero. Like it's not like they might be able to rally against it. That's not how this would go down.
Well,
they have unlimited fire capability.
You're not very familiar with Vietnam then, because you talk about guerrilla warfare, you go underground, people get creative. It's not going to be a fight that we can win, but it can be a fight that we can make hurt. And it can be a resistance where if the government really does go crazy and try to steamroll over its citizenship, that it wouldn't just be able to steamroll over them.
Do you believe the United States government really wants to allow you to keep guns so they can be overthrown, though?
No, I don't.
I don't think they care from that perspective.
But at a very basic instinct, I think it's important.
Isn't that how this reads to you, the Second Amendment, though? Militias.
Yes.
Militias overthrow governments.
Yes, that was the intent of it. That's my point.
The very government that's giving you the right to carry guns carried the guns to overthrow them, which doesn't make sense in today's.
But our government is based on checks and balances. That's the whole premise of the government.
Well, that is true. That is true.
And the greatest check and balance is priority number 2.
But the check and balance isn't from a firearm standpoint anymore. It's from a congressional and honestly from a financial standpoint. Like those two things are way heavy hitters in trying to sway or persuade or impose your want on the government than firearms are.
Yes,
firearms have zero say in that conversation.
No, they have no sway. But at the very base level, it's still a physical balance. It's still a physical balance. I think it's. Can I move you? Agree. Can I make you move the way I want you to move? Yes or no? And if I can't move you, if I can't move the citizen the way I want them to move, then that's the check and balance. That's as simple as it gets.
So here's a we've elected a Congress of crazies. Oh well, that might actually be the truth. We've elected a Congress of crazies. We have a crazy president. They just decided they're going to control the United States. No voting. We're done voting. Our citizens are allowed to take arms and overthrow the new crazy government.
Yeah, 100% based on the Second Amendment.
Is that why that
Do I
exists?
think-
Is that why it exists today? Voting's been
I mean, we
voting's
saw
been
it with
hijacked.
the Capitol riots.
Voting's been
We-
hijacked. We have a crazy government, and your citizens are allowed now because you've been allowed to keep arms, not to bear arms. It's you have them in your home now. You can go in and overthrow this crazy government.
See, that's not a you can. It's just it's kind of the decision that you have to make, right? You're basically deciding to commit treason at that point.
Yes.
I don't think that the Second Amendment is permission to overthrow the government. It's not permission, but it's there to allow people to have guns, so that option is there, and that's the important part. It's the option. It's
Yep.
when you walk
And
down the
again-
sidewalk and you see Mean Joe Green. It's the option that he could put you through that wall that you stand right next to, right? It's that option, and so that's what.
But
That's what it is.
You're talking at it from an individualistic standpoint again, Kessler. I think,
And that's just,
let me
that's
let
just
me
the analogy, though.
rephrase-
That's just the analogy that I'm using. If you
I
look,
got you.
You know what I'm saying?
So
Let me say this too, and again, I think it's still. I'm an advocate for guns. Like, I make that comment with the thought that, again, I think people should have the right to bear arms and have guns, and they should be able to have any, for the most part, any gun that they want as long as they're using it responsibly. But we need to do proper background checks to make that that warranted. But yeah, it's just, I always have that thought. You're bringing guns to a drone fight. Given the context and the reasoning for the Second Amendment, I think it's obsolete from that standpoint in my eyes. And I guess that's the point I'm trying to make, Kessler, is that I feel like it's more or less obsolete. Not that, again, just because of that, like, no one should have any guns. That's not the point I'm trying to make from that either.
So was January 6th illegal then?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. That was treason or whatever. I mean, whatever crime they committed some
mean,
kind of crime.
Well,
That was ridiculous.
I mean, here-
Well, we allow our citizens to keep guns just
Exactly.
because they need to
LJ,
overthrow
you
us.
have the right to do that. Yes, you have the right
But
to
that's
do
the
that. But
balance.
if you lose, you also face the
It's a good
consequences.
point.
Just
Yeah.
like any choice
Yeah,
that
you gotta
make,
you gotta
right?
win that day in order for
Yep,
yeah.
you have
Right.
the choice to do
Yeah.
that.
You gotta
had
win.
we tried to secede, had we
Interesting.
tried to seceded, had we tried to have seceded from England, right? It was England. I'm terrible
England, yeah, it
with
was
history,
England.
but seceded from England and not been able to pass the Second Amendment doesn't mean shit.
Well, that's
It's irrelevant
yeah. Well, it's
because you lost in the own rules that you've written, right? And so if you want to heed arms and take that to mean the context of, yeah, all right, I have the right to rebel against my government. Okay, if you are unsuccessful in that rebellion, you're going to be stuck living with the consequences of your actions at that point, like you do with anything.
I've worked for a lot of people up into this part of my life, and I've had some good bosses and some bad bosses, but I think one thing that keeps a boss from just completely steamrolling some of their employees is the threat that, hey, this person could just walk into my office and just punch me right in the face if they wanted to. If I treated them so poorly that is an option within reality. Now, yes, you'd get arrested, you go to jail. Is it the right thing to do? No, it is not the right thing to do. That's not what I'm saying. But the important part of that is that it is an option within the reality, is that
Yep.
if you treat somebody so badly, even at work, when you're in a position of power and they should be doing what you're telling them to do, but if you treat them poorly, that there's options where they can, key your car or they can harm you physically. And I think that
play,
at its basis form keeps people in check.
if I can play devil's advocate to that,
Sure.
Kessler, from
Yeah.
the standpoint of you, like, the context and shaping of saying if they treat you poorly, you have the right to do that. You have the right to do that if they're the nicest person to you on the planet.
That's true too.
And you have the right then to have to deal with the consequences of that. So from like a neutral standpoint of looking at that context and that situation, whether or not they treat you good or bad is irrelevant. Like, you have the right to do that regardless.
Okay, so we're going to keep our AKs. We're going to get better background checks.
Yep.
We have responsible gun ownership in the Will household because only one person has to go to the safe, and he doesn't give it to Will.
Yep.
Unless Will's already suited up and ready to go out deer hunting. But Will,
Unless,
for the majority,
unless I got the Blaze Orange on.
but Will, the majority of people out there do not treat guns as responsibly as what you have described. And my data point is from my own experience. Two data points. Number one is my father, when he was actually having an affair, thought my mother was going to kill him. It was probably a pretty good conclusion. Yes. And so he had a handgun. And so what did he do with his handgun? He gave it to me. I was 15 years old. I had a handgun tucked between my mattress and my box spring at 15 years old. So my mother didn't shoot my father.
No.
Now, my mother wasn't a violent woman. She wouldn't have gone down that path. But I thought, okay, well, that was, now as an adult, I think about how irresponsible that was of him. Right. But the other one I have was a neighbor. I'll call him a very, very smart guy. He explained to me once that he had 9 loaded guns in his home at all times. Not locked, not put away. He had a young son, I would guess under 10 years old. And I tried to explain to him that that was very dangerous, and that's how young 10-year-old boys get hurt or show their friends a gun and shoot each other. And he told me they're not going to do them any good if they're locked up. I'm like, well, you might change your mind if someone comes over here and does harm. So not everybody, I believe, has smart gun ownership as they're supposed to. And I like to remind everybody that smart gun ownership is the way to go. And you're saving your life. You're saving somebody else's life. You're providing some better thought around gun ownership, so maybe things like this don't happen. And then there's always the look out for the warning signs of people around you. And when they start to do crazy things, you might want to give somebody a heads up that something might be wrong with this person. That's the Bourbon Bar for this week.
Cheers, gents.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining us. Talk with your friends, talk with strangers, learn some new stuff. The world will be a better place for it. We are going to close with a song called Ohio by Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Ohio was actually about the Kent State shootings in Kent, Ohio. It was actually the government that did the shootings. It was Vietnam protesting, and it was during the Nixon administration. The protesting got out of hand. The government responded, and it's actually gone down in history as not one of our finer moments. Thank you, everyone.